It's Friday, time for our roundtable discussion of some of the week's most important and interesting stories. There's a new intelligence report out suggesting that al-Qaeda may be on the decline, but so is American dominance in the world. One of the big guessing games of the week has been whether Senator Hillary Clinton will become Secretary of State under an Obama administration. If so, how would she be received around the world? And it appears that Iran under President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad now has enough nuclear material with modification that could be used as a nuclear bomb. We're joined again by Carla Robbins, Deputy Editorial Page Editor of the New York Times, and Gideon Rose, Managing Editor of Foreign Affairs Magazine. Good Friday to you both. All right, let me begin with this, for lack of a better word, global trend study by U.S. intelligence agencies. And it initially says the good news here is that al-Qaeda appears to be on the wane or the decline in the Muslim world for a number of factors. Gideon, do you buy into that?
I do buy it. It's sort of like a race to the bottom. Will the U.S. decline faster than its enemies and opponents? The problem is al-Qaeda doesn't really have any good answers to the modern world, and their standard methods are coercion and violence. And after a while, especially when there's no enemy attractive enough for them to oppose, people aren't going to like what they have to offer. And with Barack Hussein Obama as the President of the United States, it makes their job tougher, which is why you've seen Zawahiri, their #2, coming out with these ridiculous criticisms which only make al-Qaeda look bad.
Carla, you buy that? Do you think that these are the last dying days of al-Qaeda?
Oh, well, no, I don't buy it. I wish it were true. I do think the notion of a long-term or nearer-term decline probably makes a lot of sense. I mean, these guys are nihilists. They don't have anything to offer. And in a world, particularly a world of increasing economic stress, there are other radical groups that offer something positive, that offer social services. That's one of the things the report says. You've got Hezbollah out there, you've got Hamas out there, you've got other groups that we may call terrorist groups, but that have two sides to them, in which they have a social service program, they have schools, they have feeding programs. Al-Qaeda doesn't offer any of that. All Al-Qaeda offers is rage, and ultimately I think that burns itself out.
Well, that was described as the bright spot,
right.
And it's hard to imagine al-Qaeda is a bright spot. But then it goes on, and I'll quote this report. It says, the U.S. will find itself as one of a number of important actors on the world stage, playing a prominent role in global events, but not a decisive one as in the past. We've talked about this, the declining presence of the United States on the global stage. But this seems to verify it here.
Well, first of all, it's a report quite a ways out.
Right, it's looking to 2025.
A couple of decades out there, and inevitably, I think that there will be a rise, both demographically, economically, of other countries. The word multipolar suggests that there will be many other powerful countries with whom we will be in direct competition. The notion of perhaps a new Cold War with multiple fronts. I think it's far too soon to say this. The goal would be, one hope, with clever leadership, with sound leadership, would be that there would be other strong players out there, China, potentially Russia, India, Brazil, who knows, and that they could all be allies. I mean, you could imagine a world in which there are many strong countries and we all work together. I don't want to predict that there's going to be a new Cold War with many, many different opponents.
So it's the glass half full, glass half empty. I mean, they go on in this report again to describe a world that's dominated by perhaps rogue states, that we have to deal with global warming here, and there's a competition for resources, competition for food. I mean, it sounds like a bad Hollywood movie.
Well, predictions are hard, especially about the future, as the line always goes. But there are lots of different scenarios that could play out. I agree with Carla, we can't know for certain which of them is going to play out. The U.S.'s relative power, its share of the overall pie, is definitely, I think, going to decline simply as other countries grow. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. When kids grow up, it doesn't hurt the parents. And ideally, if they're raised properly, it helps everybody because you have a whole community of serious, responsible adults. So if China and India and many other major powers in the developing world can grow and liberalize their economies and their politics and become true stakeholders in a global liberal world, then we'll all be better off.
There's a really critical point here, which is that you can go into this and say, big threat. Or you can go into it the way that Gideon's talking about, in which you want to encourage healthy development in these countries, because that would make it a safer world. And that worldview, is going to really determine how things play out.
All right, I want to move the prognosticating a little closer, and now that's trying to figure out this week, Secretary of State. A lot of talk about Hillary Clinton, Senator Hillary Clinton.
A multipolar administration.
Do you like the idea? Obviously, Carla, you think this is a good choice.
I think if President-elect Obama chooses her, I think it'll be an incredible statement of self-confidence on his part. She is a very powerful woman. She has her own support in many ways. I think the big mistake would be to say you've got Joe Biden as vice president. He knows an enormous amount about foreign policy, so let him run things. We've already seen the danger of that, of having a vice president who tries to run too many things on his own. If he decides to make Biden happy and have a weak Secretary of State, that's a bad idea. You need to have a very strong chief diplomat. And she's a really smart woman who knows how to do her homework. And I think she could be a team player. She's been a team player in the Senate. So I think, this is not an endorsement, although we did in the New York Times endorse her for president. I think it would show strength on President Obama's side, and I think she'd do a good job.
You mentioned strength, I think, maybe 4 times, which is one of the criticisms. I know that Thomas Friedman came out and said that perhaps she's too strong, too independent-minded, not the conduit to the president other nations might want to hear.
Well, if Carla is right and the choice is being made as a self-confident act, then I agree with her entirely. If it's being made from a position of weakness, in a sense that you would have, as it were, a multipolar administration, a rival for authority from the Oval Office, that would be very bad. And so we really don't know what's going on in the negotiations between the Clinton camp and the Obama camp. And so I think that a lot of it depends how it plays out on whether she would indeed be as good a team player in the administration as she ultimately was during the campaign.
But I don't see anything from President Obama and his team at this point that suggests weakness. I don't think they're desperate to have her in because somehow they've lost, TK% of the Democratic Party. He has a very strong mandate. He's quite a disciplined guy. I personally think that it would show strength on his part if he were to choose her.
Just in the seconds we have left, I have to move on to Iran, this new report that came out from the International Atomic Energy Agency. Carla, did it really change anything? And keep your answer short, please.
It's a symbolic point. It does show that they're moving ahead. We don't know whether or not they're, know how to build a weapon yet, but it does show that this is a really pressing danger, and it's something that the next administration is going to have to deal
Gideon,
with.
the same deadline.
It confirms the trend that things are going in a bad direction, and they have the Iranian nuclear program needs to be capped. That's going to be a really tough challenge, whoever is the next Secretary of State.
Gideon Rose, Carla Robbins, thank you very much. Have a wonderful holiday.
You too.
You too.